I wanted to welcome Mitchell Taylor, the Managing Director of Taylor's Wines, great Australian wine company, to the Be Better Off show by Kelly+Partners, where what we try and do is interview and spend some time with some of Australia's most interesting business people to inspire you and to help make you healthier, wealthier, wiser, and most importantly, have some fun.
You're listening to the Be Better Off show by Kelly+Partners.
Life's too short. You've got to drink the good stuff, Brett. Great to be here on the show.
Great to have you. Now, I'd love to start by explaining to our viewers and listeners that the genesis of this meeting was I was posting a great cocktail I'd mixed up last week, and Mitchell, a good friend of mine, sent me a message and he said, "Mate, forget those overseas-based liquors that you're drinking. Promote Australian wine." And so I had seen that wine sales are apparently Australians are at home, isolated, drinking lots of wine. And so I thought, that's a great idea. And so Mitchell's been good enough to send me this amazing twin pack. And I'll just take my screen off and show you just this amazing thing that he's sent me. And it's really good. It's important to have friends. It's also very important to have friends that send you things like this. So here's the twin pack of Taylor's wines. Now, before I get to drinking that, I might start, while we start this conversation. Where should I start here, Mitchell? There's two.
Yeah, these are our St Andrews range. So start with the Chardonnay. And the great thing, and I know, Brett, you love innovation and being world leaders, and this is an idea that happened back in 2000 called the screw cap. You've got to open it, just hold the collar, work the base of the wine.
Amazing.
And bang. And such a simple thing.
Now here I was, Mitchell. I was ready. I had my corkscrew.
Yeah.
And then I realised in preparing that I didn't need it, that we had some great Australian innovation.
And the great innovation, where all great ideas happen, I was at a Clare Valley winemakers meeting in the local pub in Auburn, and we were whinging about all these corks and all the cork taint and the bad things they had. And I said to the other fellow Clare Valley winemakers, I said, "Look, we're sounding like whinging poms here. We've got to be proactive. We've got to be innovative." And a lot of the screw caps at the time were being used for things like spirits, but we had a lovely collar. So we trialled them back in 2000 with our Clare Valley Rieslings. And before you know it, that little spark of an idea, it just took over the wine world. And I'm proud to say our little family business, which is now 50 years old, was the first winery in the world to go 100% screw cap across our whole range.
So that's an amazing way to start our conversation, Mitchell, and to hear that story. I've often been caught short not having the right screw.
And that's a lot of people say to me, "Oh, don't you want to go back to cork? Isn't it, romantic?" And I say, no, it's not, because it can make the wine smell like dirty socks. It's got trichloroanisole, which is a cork taint problem. You can have random oxidisation, and the cork is an old piece of bark that comes from Europe. And why would you want beautiful Australian wine to be spoiled by old bark from the other side of the world? And when people talk about romance, I say, look, to me, going in a horse and cart is very romantic, but we don't use it to go from work day to day. And I think the Australian wine industry has grown up with innovation and technology, because there's seraphim tin in there, and this is a far superior seal that actually helps the wine not only be fresh and lovely today, but it actually helps it age a lot better over a long period of time.
Well, it's a great point there, Mitchell, because I'm not a huge drinker, believe it or not. And when I drink a bottle of wine, I don't drink a whole bottle. And if if my wife doesn't want the same bottle I want, this allows me to open a couple of bottles. You can have white, I can have red or white, and then I can seal them and drink them again at the next opportunity. So that's amazing. Now, tell us the history of the business. The business is now 50 or 51 years old. Remember is it?
Yeah, 51 years old, and my grandfather, Big Bill Taylor Senior, he was a country boy from Bega. Was early on a dairy farmer. Then he became, he was quite good at footy, so he got a scholarship. Came to Sydney. Did that, and then he met my grandmother, who was from a publican family, became a hotelier, but he had this great vision where he loved the great international wines of the world, and he actually loved the Bordeaux wines. So what his vision was to sell some of the hotels and to start a new winery in the beautiful Clare Valley, in the southern end of the valley, with beautiful Terra Rossa soil, that he planted 400 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon.
And what was his name, Mitchell?
Bill Taylor.
So,
or actually Wilbred. He had a very rare name.
William.
Yeah, it wasn't William, it was Wilbred. But he used to call himself Bill, or we as grandchildren used to call him Big Bill, because my father was also a Bill. But he didn't like Wilbred because he got bagged a bit, that it was a bit snotty or well-bred, sort of thing.
So it's this is an amazing story of vision. At what age was he when he decides to sell, the hotels, which would have been businesses that you could rely on, and take this punt on 400 acres in the middle of nowhere in those days? He
was approaching his twilight years. He was probably, still a youngish man in his 60s, because he'd had a full career in both the law and the hotels prior to that. But he in partnership with my father, Bill, who was more a young fellow, about mid-20s, that they went on this great adventure and decided to plant a vineyard in the Clare Valley. And it happened in 1969, in July the 20th. And can you tell me what other great thing happened on that day in history, Brett?
That your birthday, or?
No, I'll give you a clue. There was one small step.
The moon landing.
Yes, on the moon landing. Right. So, and we've actually got a range of wines that talk about that with the moon landing. So that was really the time in history where my grandfather and father got onto this new enterprise. And the reason I remember it, because look at me, I'm a young fellow at heart, but I was about 5 years at the time, and I just remember vividly that moon landing, and then I remember then seeing this new vineyard being developed, and then I remember them building the winery and seeing the bricklayers throwing bricks, about 2 or 3 stories high at the time that the moon landing was on. So, yeah, it's an exciting time of innovation and trying new things, because at the time when we did it, we were laughed, my family were laughed from one end of the Clare Valley to the other, because they just all shook their head and said, don't those tailors know? You just can't make good fortified or port wine out of Cabernet Sauvignon. And that was the state of the Australian wine industry back 50 years ago.
Yeah, right. So your father, what did your father study, viticulture or some type of horticulture, or what was his background?
No, I'm actually the one that has got to be able to do that, on their wisdom, but they at the time had just seen market trends happening. They could see the food and wine culture was improving within Australia. There was people that were starting to dine in. So they had friends from overseas in Europe, and they could see the trends that were happening in Europe, and with all the immigration happening in Australia back then, they could see an opportunity. So that's why we've named the wine the Visionary after them, because they could really see probably some of the consumer trends that were happening in front of them.
at the time. And so then as you come into the business, your father would have been, what, in his late 40s, and you come in. How did you handle, I guess for many family businesses, that integration of generations, old bull, young bull, different ideas? How was your dad and your grandfather in bringing you through, training you up and integrating you into the business?
Well, I've got a funny story there. While I grew up around the winery and I loved grape picking and doing things, I was also, I wanted to explore and travel. So I always said, look, the wine game's good, but I've got to go off and do my own thing. But one day at Taylor's, many years before I joined the business, this big box arrived. And they just looked at this box for about six to 9 months. No one knew what to do with it. And you know what was in the box, don't you? There was this thing called a computer. And so
you became the computer guy.
Yeah, so I came in as an IT guy initially. I said, look, I'll show you how to plug it in. I'll only work for 3 months. But as I got into that project, I actually looked in and went, wow, the family business is very interesting from the inside, but I could see what was good about it, but I could see, gee, it needed a lot of bloody, we had to really get with the times. So what became just a 3-month job, in the end I thought, no, there's a lot I can do here. And their nurturing was always we had a lot of solid rules back then, and they told me rules that the business did, and they did. And I used to, being the younger generation, say things like, why not? Because they had a rule that one of the best lessons I learned from my father was, after planting all those grapes in the late 70s, as a younger fellow, a bit older, I can remember the chainsaws going through the vineyard. And I said, gee, I could see Dad almost tearing up. And he basically was saying, yeah, we're grafting half the Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignon over to white wine. And I said, wow, why are you doing that? And basically the lesson I learnt then was, just remember, son, we're not in the wine business, we're actually in the fashion business. And at the time, the doctors were saying in the late 70s that red wine wasn't good for your health. It had too many histamines.
Yep.
And of course, I'll never forget that lesson, because literally about 5-10 years later, the same doctors were saying, you know what, we've actually done some more research.
And it makes you live longer.
Good, yeah, red wine's good for your cardiovascular, with all the resveratrol that's in the red wine.
It's an interesting story, because there's that story, that Steve Jobs was very famous for, of saying that if you won't disrupt yourself and you won't destroy your legacy business, someone else will do it for you. Yeah. And so here's your father, 40, 50 years before, saying, hey, son, look at the customer, focus on what they want. Yeah. That's who we're here to help. Maybe they want white, give them white. There's that great musical called Chicago, where the old bloke says, give them the old razzle dazzle. And it reminds me of that, we're in the fashion business. Now, I just wanted to interrupt, Mitchell, to share with you that, my father was an Englishman from Nottingham. And I bought myself from the cheese room some Cole Bassett Bleu from Shropshire. So it's got a real colour about it. Well, it's the colour of my lion there.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Look at that. I'd love to share it with you. It's a real
I should have got a bit of cheese at this end too.
I'm going to send some over to your office on Monday. And you'll know that for the next one. My trusty personal assistant said, Brett, you can't be doing a wine tasting without cheese. And I said, okay.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I'm a real cheese nut. And an interesting fact that I often say, when I have cheese, I often have it with beautiful Clare Valley Riesling, because it's very clean, particularly if you've got a lot of different cheeses to try. And I find, a bit like this St Andrews Chardonnay, I find the cleanness of the Riesling great to go between the cheeses.
Let me tell you about this cheese. I'll put it up on screen here. It says the Colston Bassett Shropshire Bleu has nothing to do with the county of Shropshire. Rather, it initiated in Scotland in the 70s before production was transferred to Leicestershire. It's made in almost the same way as Stilton, except for its colouring, given by the addition of annatto, a seed from a bush native to South America. Cheese has a full, lingering flavour with a hint of nuttiness to balance the sweet blue notes. More mellow than Stilton, is wonderfully enjoyed with a stick of celery and a glass of dark wine.
Well, perfect with, good wine.
So there you go. So your dad's grafting over his reds with whites due to the fashion and the incorrect advice of
the times.
What are the other rules they had that have stood the test of time?
The other rules were like we had to plant every grape we made at the time was we had to grow it in the vineyard and bring it all the way through. And being a young boy looking at the market, another thing I was able to influence and change was to go with the technology at the time. So I said, if we're going to have to wait 10 years to bring these wines through, the market might go to other people and we won't be in it. And particularly after I did the computers, I started to work as a winemaker, but also work in the export markets. And at the time, everyone wanted Australian Shiraz. So I was able to convince the family that if we knew how to grow good grapes, but we also had the ability to influence the other growers to grow great grapes like we do in partnership. And that enabled us to get closer to our customers and to go with some of these trends that were emerging. So that was a very positive thing.
So you set up partnerships with some of the other growers, sourced their grapes and made your wines?
Yes, and to help them, a lot of them were just farmers that weren't too sure. So I could say to them, well, we've got all this experience. This is how you can make very high quality grapes. So in a way, we were sharing our IP in growing, top quality, very best grapes. So that partnership worked really well. And the other thing on the technology side was we were able to move away. The family wanted us to do 100% hand picking.
Yeah.
And while hand picking's nice and good, it's very labour intensive.
It's romantic, like
the corks.
Like cork.
And we had the technology, particularly with this St Andrews Chardonnay, is the best time to pick these grapes is in the cool nights when you bring them in and you keep the purity. So we were able to bring in all our white wines with mechanical harvesting in the middle of the coolest part of the night to make a wine that was even better quality. So that was a great breakthrough. And at times, I used to quiz my older grandfather and father and say, why don't we use this new technology? And they would say, oh, look, we tried that, 5-10 years ago and it didn't work. I'm saying, yeah, but as you know, technology changes so quickly and they learn from mistakes. So we often trialled new technology as the guinea pig, and I said, let's now re-look at it and adapt to the times. So I think that's been a good thing, that I've had great leaders and great mentors in both my grandfather and father, but they've also let me have enough rope to prove a point to them. And I've always appreciated that. Because another thing, my dad always loved our estate range, but when I went to Charles Sturt Uni as a winemaking student, we had all these beautiful batches of old vines and beautiful grapes that we were just blending into our $10 bottle of range.
Yeah.
Look, there's this thing called Grange Hermitage that's making, really expensive wines. why don't, we've got the same materials and we've got the distinguished site and the passion. Let's take on the best. And that took a while to prove. And a funny story I tell.
And what did that wine become, Mitchell? That's the one, the
St Andrews.
Sorry? St Andrews.
Yeah.
The wine that I once got from
wines.
You. Yeah.
And the funny story, when I said, Bill said, look, no one will buy wine that is over $50 a bottle. They just won't buy it. And that was back in the time, and he might have been wise. And he said, look, I'll let you do it, but you've got to make sure you make the very best that you can. And so prior to launching this range of St Andrews wines, I'm thinking, God, I've got to prove to my old man that I'm not just on this, wild goose chase. That we're actually going to make some pretty good wines. So with the St Andrews launch, he kept asking me, have you won any big trophies? Have you won any gold medals? And I said, look, we're getting there, but, it takes a while for for your hard work to do it. But just the month before we launched, the national magazine of our industry, Wine State, did a big tasting for the whole year, over 10,000 wines from all over Australia. And guess what? We won with St Andrews 2 trophies. And so I'm really excited, and we're on the front cover of the magazine. So I ring up Bill and I tell him, I said, Bill, I've got some great news for you. We've just won 2 trophies for the St Andrews wines. And he said, oh, that's great, but it's a bit of a hard marker. And he said, okay, so what did you win it for? I said, we got the trophy for the best white wine with our St Andrews Riesling, actually, which is part of this range. And we got the trophy for the best white wine. But he said, but was there a trophy for the best wine? And I said, yeah. And we're actually, the St Andrews white wine is on the cover of this very prestigious magazine with the red wine. And he said, well, that's not good enough. Why don't you get both? And I said, oh, give me a break. And I said, aren't you going to ask me what wine is the other wine on the cover? And he said reluctantly, okay, what wine is it? I said, well, it's actually Grange Hermitage of the 1990 vintage, which was actually their best ever vintage of that century.
And what vintage was your wine?
Ours was the 94 Riesling.
So you got a 94 wine up against the 1991. And there it is.
Together, being highlighted as 2 of Australia's best wines. So I thought that's a good way to launch a new product that hadn't even been on the market.
It's a nice story, though, because it shows that while your dad loved you and he cared about you and he gave you opportunity, like most entrepreneurs and business owners, they're an edgy bunch. They're not really ever satisfied with, good on you, son, you came first and well done. And by the way, why didn't we win the best wine?
Another funny story is, because Bill's got a lot of pride, and he created what is still our best-selling range, and that was the estate range. And that's our Cabernet and our Shiraz. So all his mates, he used to at Christmas give them bottles of his range. And then he would always ignore the St Andrews range and pretend it didn't exist. But then, because the St Andrews became more and more successful over the years and was more expensive, his mates used to say to him, why don't you give me the cheap stuff? Don't we deserve the good wine like I gave you? Don't we deserve the good stuff? And so he then reluctantly said, oh, look, can I have a bit of sample of the St Andrews range? And so I just stirred him up a bit and said, oh, why is that, Bill? Do you finally,
You still turn up retail, don't you, to send to his mates?
That's your favourite one. But you're right. As entrepreneurs, you do tend to love being close to something you created. So I've always got a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a beautiful bottle. I'm going to do a shout out here to our friends. This is absolutely fantastic. The St Andrews, first planted in 1892, Chardonnay Clare Valley. This is a 2017. Now, it's got a lot of stickers on it. It's got the double gold, but in Germany, Berlin International Wine Cup. Testing my eyes here.
It's won international gold medals. 5 international gold
medals. So, guys,
around the globe.
Guys, this is a great wine. This is an Australian wine. This is a 51-year-old Australian family company. There is a crisis on, and while the guys are doing well selling to all of us stuck at home and need something to do, which is drink some wine, obviously the restaurants, the other part of the trade has slowed down. So I'm going to give a pack of this away that we're going to buy from Mitchell, and I'm going to urge people to go and find it and support it, because this is an Australian business that is providing jobs in Australia, and many of them, and has been doing it for a long time. So I want to call that out. This is absolutely superb. And I want to show you my cheese. It's
beautiful.
A bit larger than it was.
And can I say, Brett, this is probably the wine that I drink the most at home, because it's my wife's favourite. So she, who must be obeyed, I always bring this home, and it if she's happy, we're all happy.
The happy wife, and it's a happy life. This is absolutely superb. It's a great story. And, one of the reasons I've written the books I've written, and we're doing the podcast we're doing, is I love to get around, the mad people. And the mad people are the people that say, I've got some pubs, but hey, why don't I plant those 400 acres?
Yeah.
They're not people that say, well, look, I'm 60, it's time to die now. They think, well, I've had a career in the law, I've had a career in the hotels, so now I think I should plant 400 acres and do something. So they get up early, they stay up late, they're kind of the go-getters. And they're a bit different, a bit odd, I get that. But they're the people that energise me and that I like to hang out with. As you then move to the MD, to running this business, is your dad still alive?
Yeah, my dad's still alive, and he's been, we've professionalised the business and moved it on a bit. So he certainly is on our board. But when it comes to, being like a chairman or sitting around a board, he's a bit more, he's a hands-on guy that just likes to be, around the business and feel the great. So, but one thing I've always maintained is to keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive of innovation. And it's things like the screw cap, the new ranges, we're now putting computer chips on our legacy wine. Another great thing we've done is we've revolutionised our labels on the back label, changed colour, not these particular ones, but our estate and promised land, on the best temperature to serve the wine at.
Now share that with us. I've seen you promote that, and one of the things, I don't have time, my clients don't want me to have time to be a wine aficionado. I'm busy working with them and trying to make them better off. But, if I serve wine, I want to know how to serve it well. And I know you've invented this scale that shows how to serve a wine at the right temperature.
Yeah, and it's an exciting thing, because a lot of people say, oh, you serve wine at room temperature. I mean, how long's the piece?
It depends what the wine is. Depends what the room is.
That's
depends
it.
what the temperature of the room is.
And it depends not only on that, the season, like they used to say that when they were in castles in Europe or the old chateaus, but the other thing is every grape variety is very different. So this Chardonnay, it should be served at a temperature of about 10 degrees room temperature, where the more full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon, that should be served at a room temperature of 16 degrees. So today, this is probably ideal room temperature, but this one probably, needs to be chilled down. But when we take this out of the fridge or out of the ice bucket, it's at 2 degrees centigrade. So really, it's too cold when you first want to drink it. Where quite often when we bring this one out, it's actually too warm.
So you can see on the label what the temperature of the bottle is. And so versus it's ideal. which I must say, people are busy. They, if I'm having people over or people, not that we can anymore, let's say I'm just having a drink with myself. I want to serve it at the right temperature. That makes it easy. I think it's a nice example of, I have a view that most traditional businesses can be done better. And even when people talk about technology, things like Uber are just doing a traditional business better.
Yes.
And so this is an example of innovation in the space. You don't need to be, in a different business. You can be in the business that you're in and try and find a better way to solve a customer's problem, which I think is really interesting. Now, tell me, with the business, you've got daughters, you've got your wife there. How do you? And I know that obviously running a large business, particularly in a time like now where there's a bit on, how have you balanced running your business with running your family?
Yeah, very. I'm a big student in best practice in family business, and I did see it in the early days. With my father and uncle working together, and they were butting heads a bit. So I didn't want that to continue, through the generations. So what I really have done is studied, from the best experts around the world on what are good governance structures that we put in. And actually we get together as a family and we keep it a bit outside the family business. So we have those structures like we have a family council, we have a family forum where we get the entire family together and just celebrate once a year the achievements of the business and communicate about how the business is going. And then we've written what we call a family constitution, which is
like a family charter, a family constitution that you've got some governance in it.
Yeah, and that's got governance, and it's more about behaviour. It's not like a company constitution, which is more a legal document, but it talks about things about like how will the next generation enter the family? Like, they've got to get outside experience. They just can't rock in and expect the world to be at their feet.
Yep.
It talks about, behaviours, if we get in conflict, how the family makes sure that we resolve it and we do it with the council in a proper manner so that we don't infect the morale of the business going forward. And it also, talks about how we do our succession because, a business like ours, a lot of passion, a lot of good things, but we've got to be evolving and changing all the time and getting the right skills in place so that, some of the members have different roles. Like I'm quite at the core, not only in management, I've got some ownership, but I'm also got the role as a family member to be an ambassador. So it's making sure you've got all those right behaviours in place and know what is family, what are relationships related to family, what is business and what are structures. So even in our own board, we were one of the first family businesses to bring in independent chair, independent directors with a lot of experience that can just keep our governance at a high level and not let the emotional family side, take over or derail, the business. Because family business and passion is a good thing, but you just got to direct it in the right area.
Very interesting thing. So one of the things, Mitchell, I've worked out over time is that probably the thing that I think people miss in private businesses more than anything is that private businesses are most impacted by the behaviours of the family, of the founders and the family. That the demands on the business come from the family. They're not always business-centred, they're family-centred. And so the key to getting that right, you hear a lot of talk about strategy, but you hear very little talk about structure. And structure's much, 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 much more important over time than strategy, in the sense that setting up the family properly, setting up the business properly so that people can harness their energies and not have the conflict and the petty animosities and the sort of crap that goes on. is so important. And it's interesting that as people become more successful, it becomes more of a challenge. And, you know, one of the things I've made a habit of is studying these European companies, family companies. I go, I meet them, I speak to them, I build relationships because I'm intrigued. You know, there's a company I'm in touch with and I've been involved with sometimes over 600-year-old Italian family company, right? 23 or 24 generations. And when they share what I call wisdom, you know, deep understanding about, you know, how do you make a company last 600 years?
Yeah. Well, for this wine, we get some of the best barrels in Burgundy from a little winery called Louis Latour. So he's got quite a reputation for making good Chardonnay. So I'm the only one that gets to buy his barrels and take them to Australia. But we had a funny letter when I asked him, you know, we're doing a bit of business together on the barrels and also in partnership in distribution in Europe. So we just need to formalise things a bit. But being, you know, and this is what my board asked me to do, but being, he's my age, Louis Fabrice, but being such a Frenchman, he went, what do you mean? You need a document.
Got my handshake.
and he said to me, don't you understand, we've been making wine since 1789. And I thought, what happened in France in 1789? Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. They actually had a revolution where they could become family businesses. So that's how long he's been...
it's a good perspective. There's a great, Mitch, there's a great story where one of the Australian cricketers went to have dinner with Ian Botham, and Ian Botham turned to him and he said, son, see my house? It's 2 times older than your country. And so it's easy in Australia not to have that long-term perspective, but when people think very long-term, they tend to make better decisions.
Yeah, so very much so.
And so with you guys, what do you see as the pressures, you know, more on your immediate family with the kids? They know you're busy, you've got operations here and around the country and around the world. Yeah. How do you manage, you know, your wife and kids, making the time and being present?
Yeah, being present. And look, you've got to have a great team around you and you know, inspire them. So it really is, you know, I work in the family business well with my 2 brothers, which works well.
But are younger or older, the brothers?
They're younger. Yep. And I also, you know, it's just encouraging everyone from family members and staff and having the same, when you're in the business, it's all the same. You know, don't have rules for one and the other. So, you know, you're encouraging everyone to be dynamic and innovative because, you know, we do live in a very competitive world and a very changing world. And if we're not always on our edge.
Yeah, watching the ball.
Yeah, watching the ball. And, you know, unfortunately, I'm part of Australia's first families of wine, but we've just lost a 140-year-old company called McWilliams. You know, they've gone into receivership. But I use that as an example. I say, you know, we've got to be on the ball and we cannot, we've got to be innovative. We've got to challenge ourselves, but we've got to always have that discipline so that we don't just take things for granted.
And it
move quickly.
Absolutely. And, you know, guys, too, you know, for the people that are watching and that will watch, you know, Mitchell saw me making my cocktail. I love a cocktail, right? I love a great cocktail bar. People that get to know me. I think these guys who can mix these cocktails are amazing and love the ambience of a great London bar or New York bar. But, you know, Mitchell was straight on to me and said, Brett, hey, we've got these great Australian wines. And, you know, I've certainly been guilty of it, if it's a crime, to sort of always be selling, always be advocating for your company, for your product, for the difference that you can make. But that's because I believe that only the paranoid survive and you've got to stay on your edge to win. Now, I want to divert, and this one's got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 gold coins on it, gold winning coins. And I've got to say, guys, I love a red. So if anyone's wondering, you know, should I send Brett a bottle of Taylor's Cabernet Sauvignon 2016, the Yes. Now I'm gonna do the screw top again, which I'm finding to be absolutely fantastic. I've got a pretty fancy glass here to rock and roll this thing, and I'm well prepared. And I'm going to pour myself a hearty half a glass and pretend that I'm being responsible. Now I've paired it with this amazing cheese. I've got to tell you, I'm going to send some of this over. Now this is my lion, my Fire Up 90 lion. It's about the colour of the lion. I'm going to ask a few more questions of Mitchell, and when we put this out, we're going to let people ask us some questions, and I intend over the next few weeks to be in touch with Mitchell and let's get some answers. But so Mitchell, when you look at your business, you know, the hardest crisis right now, you were talking to me just before we got on camera about, you know, the stay-at-home isolation market is booming. People are getting on the drink, which is great, and I encourage you, if you're going to get on the drink, to get on a Taylor's wine. Here it is. It's absolutely fantastic.
With great food and great family and in moderation, of course. But
yeah, that's right. And it really does encourage people, this limiting of people's social situation, to spend time with their family, to have a glass of wine, to speak to each other and spend some time together. But the flip side of that, the restaurant scene, often the people that promote these products and show your best wines to people, obviously we've got a heart for these artisans of food and wine. What can we do, or what do you see as the COVID world, the post-China virus world? What happens next? And what do we do as a family business, as a business that wants to win?
That's it. And even in these really uncertain and changing times, the business models are really being challenged. And we've got, as I was saying before, we're actually selling quite a bit of wine through our bottle shops and our partners there, which is good because people are consuming at home. But then all our restaurant and hotel customers, they've literally stopped overnight. And even our own cellar door, you know, that we rely on people to come and visit the beautiful Clare Valley, that's just stopped overnight. So we've had to get very proactive because no one's visiting us. We now have a lot of offers on our website, so we can deliver, you know, directly.
Tours of the Clare Valley running on the web, where we can log in and have a tour take us through.
Yeah, you can taste through. We're doing on Facebook every Thursday afternoon. We're doing a series of tastings in our cellar door with, you know, some of the wines, and encouraging people to feel they're visiting us. And then if they want to order, they can approach us directly or some of our partners in the off trade. And then the other thing, because a lot of the restaurants have been affected, we're about to launch this new website called Buy Local, which is a directory which will really help everyone that, you know, when we used to go to our local favourite bar, club or restaurant, let's support them now that they've been closed down and going through a very difficult time.
Make sure that you're on the other side.
Yeah, so we'll have all their details, and we want people to get involved and say, this is my local. And then on this website, you can plug in, you know, okay, I'm in this part of Australia, and then see where all the local restaurants are that will give you a home delivery and also provide some wine to have with it. So,
but I'll pair your wines with their home delivery.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, you know, we're encouraging people to do that. But, you know, if they want to have someone else's wine, so be it. You know, all Australian wine, you know, it's not as good as this, but it's still, Australian wine still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now tell me, have you set up a subscription service? Can we buy, you know, can we support your business by signing up to spend X amount per month and you just send us the wine? Or
yeah, you can definitely, you know, we'd appreciate the support because we have had a very tough drought year. So while it's good that people are looking for wine, we were down 60% with our yields this year because we've been in drought for 18 months. But look, you can go to our website, taylorswines.com.au, or any of our good partners, you know, from Dan Murphy, Liquorland, IGA celebrations, BWS, we Icebox, our good friend David Owens, Coogee Wine Room, we've got a lot of...
Out there, and doing a great job of getting the wines out there. Do you ever think, I often have people say to me, they say, hey, Brett, that accounting firm that your dad built, that's great. Then I don't correct them, but my dad didn't start it, but he was in food, he was in food service, interestingly enough, and gave me a great appreciation for food and wine and cheese and things. But you still have that, you see your name on this box, you see the quality of the product, the commitment of your team, and the sort of passion that's in these guys from the ground up, and think, wow, like it's a huge privilege to lead an organisation making that type of impact.
I do. You get a great pride. And I was looking at Facebook actually yesterday, and 2 years ago, because I've got a very tough job. So 2 years ago, I was stuck in this place called Cognac, visiting my coopers, looking at the best oak barrels in the world. And I just went from Cognac, where I was with them, down to a little place called Bordeaux, they make some good wines. And I was with my lovely wife.
Video of you. Is this where the head of the wine growing association gave you an award, or what was that story?
Yeah, well, what it was, that really inspired my grandfather, the great wines of the world. So I was visiting, particularly my daughter, who's currently here, at uni, called Margot. It's like the shadow Margot inspired my grandfather. But what happened that day, which was a great celebration and made me, it almost makes me tear up, was I got a call that we had just won with our Cabernet Sauvignon the Concours International de Cabernet in France for the world's best Cabernet Sauvignon. And I was just going, wow. I was just over the moon.
What vintage was that? Was that a St Andrews, or what was the vintage?
No, it was actually, and we've just released it, our 2014 Visionary Cabernet Sauvignon.
Can we grab a couple of bottles of that, maybe 3 bottles of that? And what I'll do is I'll give a bottle away to anyone that asks an intelligent question after this. We'll pick a winner. I'd love to give a bottle of that away. So how do you feel, you're involved in this?
Over the moon. And I felt so honoured to be able, on behalf of the hard-working team that I represent.
But also the entire... What I've seen, Mitchell, is this willingness of you to be an ambassador in a generous way, not just for your family company, but for the entire Australian wine industry. Did you feel that was, a win for Australia?
Yeah, a great win. And everyone was so proud. My fellow winemakers were ecstatic. I'm a member of Australia's First Families of Wine, and, Stephen Henschke, Bruce Tyrrell, everyone said, well done, mate. We're proud of you. I'm on the Wine Australia board, so all my colleagues, like Brian Crozer, who made Crozer, just said, he's a bit of a guru. He just said, this is great. This is one for the industry. So I got, very proud, because it sort of demonstrates that we do, for a great country that we are, Australia, at times we do really bat above our weight, taking on the people that have been making wine for many centuries, that have all the great resources. I just thought, wow, not only is extraordinarily lucky to do that, but just very privileged, with the great team that we have and the resources that we have here in Australia.
So, guys, I want to thank Mitchell Taylor from Taylor's Wine for joining us tonight. I have enormous admiration for him and his dad and his grandfather and the journey that they've been on. It's one thing to win in a moment. It's another thing to win consistently over time. And I hope everyone's heard here some of those principles of being willing to take, to back yourself in rather than take risks, to continue to innovate, and to understand that while life is short, it's certainly there to be lived, and to be, be generous with the way that you think about, your company and your contribution to your industry and your nation. I've noted, Mitchell isn't aware of this, but I've noticed Mitchell's commitment to the Wallabies, that great Australian institution, hopefully soon to be better led. His utter passion for his industry, all participants, for Australia as a nation and the difference that he can make. But this is a great family business story, and this shows what we can do, with a bit of get up and go and a bit of gumption and a bit of attention to the client. And so, look, as a young bloke, younger guy relative to Mitchell's father and grandfather, I think it's a hugely inspiring story for anyone who wants to run a great business. Now, we do have a crisis on. If you think about when this business was founded, 1969, there's been the odd oil crisis and stock market plunge and other things that come along, but this business has survived, and it's survived through that grit and that willingness to innovate. So I really want to thank Mitchell for a couple of things. A, sharing his amazing family business story today. B, sending me this incredible twin pack, which I've sat here and chowed down. I just want to do a shout out for this Cabernet Sauvignon. For anyone who likes a red, there's a lot of gold coins on this, and I can understand. The twist top, really is one of humanity's great inventions. It's not quite penicillin, but it's not, it's not far behind. It means that you can drink your wine responsibly. It's sustainable in that there's much less waste. And, none of the times you can't get a cork back in and you end up wasting a bottle of wine. But this is a great Australian company. So when you are in a shop, ask for Taylor's Wines. When you see Taylor's Wines, buy a bottle and know that you're supporting a great Australian business. As you guys know, my name's Brett Kelly. This is Mitchell Taylor, Managing Director of Taylor's Wine. Our show is called the Be Better Off Show. And what is it about? It's about making people better off. And so that means for us healthy, wealthy, wiser, and also fun. And this segment has been, I think, absolutely fantastic. I want to thank Mitchell from the bottom.
My pleasure. And thanks, Brett, for your support. Love it. Cheers to the best of Australian wine.
Legend.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.